Hi, everyone. I have an exciting update for you today. This is on the Nisutlin Bay Bridge project in Yukon Territory of Canada. Since that previous video I did back in May, a number of you have reached out to me and provided construction drawings for the project, photos of the project, as well as video. While this one individual was crossing the existing bridge, you could see the construction of the adjacent bridge. And this individual sent me video footage that dated from the 2024 and 2025 construction season. And I'm going to keep all of your names confidential as you've requested, but it really enhances the quality of these videos, particularly since the Yukon government has not saw fit to be very transparent, in my opinion. Their statements have been rather vague, and there's not enough detail to really explain what the situation is to have caused this problem and what the exact plan is going forward. Although we have a lot of information now that I'm going to cover in this video. Also, Valuespace collaborated with me on this video. They did an independent analysis using Sentinel-1 and 2 satellite data from European Space Agency. So now we have ground movement data for the abutments, south and north abutments, as well as how the placement of the fills in those locations have caused stability problems that have impacted the existing bridge. This is the location of the Nisutlin Bay Bridge replacement project, located near the town of Teslin, Yukon. This is a photo showing the original bridge that was constructed from 1941 to 1942 by the U.S. Army. This was part of the Alaska Highway project that was built on an emergency basis during World War II over a period of 8 months, which is absolutely amazing. The orange painted truss bridge that you see off to the left is the current existing bridge that was built between 1953 and 1956 by the Canadian government. And as I mentioned, Valuespace provided an independent analysis of the ground movements at this project location. Their analysis covered the period that predates bridge construction as well as the full period of bridge construction till now, and there are very clear and disturbing patterns that have emerged. This is a picture of the north abutment of the existing bridge. This is prior to the construction of the work trestle as well as prior to construction of the new bridge. This photo was taken in early 2023. And this is a picture taken of the same north abutment in 2024. And you can see there's an extensive amount of fill that's been placed for the abutment and the approach to the bridge spans on the north side. And this is a key design feature of this new bridge. They deliberately extended the amount of fill into the bay in order to reduce the amount of bridge structure that had to be built. And there were supposedly some other reasons to support local stakeholders, which I wasn't exactly clear about. Although I think one aspect for using fill instead of pile supported bridge structure was to reduce the amount of pile driving, and that was to reduce the potential impacts that the concussion, if you will, the wave, the compression wave generated from driving a pile underwater would have on the fish population. I understand they use bubble curtains to mitigate those impacts, but again, to the extent that you can eliminate some of that pile driving in favor of fill placement, that would go to improving uh, or mitigating the risks to that situation. And you can see that this fill extends about 385 feet past the original bridge abutment. And we just look side by side here. You can see the existing trusses that are now replaced by fill for the new bridge. So you're looking at the elimination of one or two bridge spans by having this extensive amount of fill in lieu of bridge structure. And this is a cross section from one of those construction drawings that was furnished to me, again from an anonymous source. Looks to be about 10 meters of fill placed on the north abutment side and the approach, so over 30 feet. And this fill was placed in a relatively short period of time between mostly 2023 and 2024 construction season. And the construction seasons only last about 4 or 5 months this far north because of the cold climate. And we also have some fill placement on the south side, but far less extensive than you have on the north. Let's just play this video that was provided to me. This was taken in June of 2024. And you can see a lot of the fill placement has already been completed. This footage is going from north to south, getting ready to cross the existing bridge. You can see all the fill that's placed for the new bridge off to the left. Looks like it extends about 10 feet higher, over 3 meters higher than the grade for the existing bridge deck. You can see the steel girders that are supported on these pile supported piers. These pile are driven steel pile, roughly 48 inches or 1,210 millimeters in diameter. Here's a photo of the south abutment from 2023, and now the south abutment in 2024. And that fill for that south abutment extended about 62 feet into the bay past the abutment for the original bridge, so far less extensive amount of fill placement compared to the north side of the bridge. Doing research on the geology of that area, I discovered that these soil deposits are what they call glacial lacustrine deposits, mostly sands, silts, and clays. So young soil deposits, they're not very well consolidated, so they're not very strong. These soils apparently were not remediated or stabilized prior to the fill placement, at least according to these construction drawings I have. There's no indication that, say, wick drains were installed in these soil deposits prior to the fill placement. That could have reduced the time for time-dependent consolidation of these soils under the stresses imposed by the fill added at these abutments. And of course, if you shorten the amount of time for that consolidation to occur, you shorten the amount of time that it takes for those soils to gain strength and reach equilibrium under those increased applied stresses. There were no indications of other ground improvement methods such as stone columns or jet grout columns, and I'm going to cover that in a bit more detail here in a moment. So let's get into the value space analysis because I think it's extremely interesting. And you can see these call outs, these circles that are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we'll look at the movement patterns at each of these locations. So for their analysis, most of the really high quality, useful data came from the existing bridge because of the high reflectivity of the steel trusses on the existing bridge. This far north, you have problems with snow cover and ice, as well as changes in the ground surface just from grading operations. So using the existing bridge as an indicator of what's going on with the overall mass of soil that was placed at these abutments is very useful. And you can see that going back to 2023 with the beginning of fill placement to today, there's approximately 45 millimeters or nearly 2 inches of movement at the existing bridge structure. And I'll show you a slide here in a bit, but there was no movement of the existing bridge structure that was evident in the satellite data prior to 2023. Now we have point 2, a little bit farther to the south on the existing bridge truss. And again, well over 1.5 inches of movement. This is movement that was not planned, was not desired. And I think they got extremely lucky that apparently the movement wasn't to the degree that it caused them problems with being able to maintain traffic on the existing bridge. But they ran a huge risk here. Location 3, we have similar results. Same with point 4 here. Now we have location 5 here at the south abutment. Movements of a little bit over 1 inch in the period since construction started in 2023. And then back up to point 6 again towards the north side of the existing bridge with movements well over 1 inch since 2023. And these satellite results still show downward trends in the movement, although the rate of movement has slowed down in recent months. Of course, it no doubt helps that they haven't been placing any more fill for well over a year or nearly 2 years at this location. These green dots illustrate the period of time prior to 2023, and you could see that there's no movement detected in the satellite data. So the movement shows strong correlation with having started and coincided with the placement of the fill on the north and south sides of these new bridge abutments and these approaches to the new structure for the bridge. And the Yukon government's own website for this project indicates the same pattern, and that really fill placement doesn't begin until the latter part of 2023. Most of the fill was placed in 2024, as you could see from the footage of the truck crossing the existing bridge. And this bridge was supposed to have been completed in March of 2026. So the Yukon government announced on April 1st that they were removing the existing contractor, Graham, and the original design engineer, WSP, from the project. I'm recording this video on August 12th, 2026, and since that time, there's been no additional details about what led to the termination of these contracts. On June 23rd, 2026, the Yukon government announced that they selected Cowie North America as the new design firm for completing this bridge project. Their scope mostly involves apparently coming up with changes in design or the design for the ground remediation that's needed in order to complete this bridge project. And then the Yukon government, apparently, with that design in hand, will go out to bid with various contracting firms and select one to go forward and actually complete this project. And this design project with Cowie North America was reportedly valued at $5 million. So that's consistent with what I told you in my previous video, that I thought it was going to cost tens of millions of dollars to get this bridge site stabilized and to complete the bridge construction project. You don't hire somebody for a $5 million design contract for just a couple $1 million worth of work. I think it's all likelihood that this project, in order to be completed, is going to cost probably in excess of another $50 million. That's my estimate based on what I've seen here. The original construction project was valued at $160 million, which has since ballooned to over $182 million. I don't believe that includes the $5 million new design contract. And so now you're pushing $190 million before you've even let the contract for completing the project. I'm going to play for you some segments of an interview that was conducted by CBC's Virginia Ann with Linda Benoit, who is the Minister of Highways and Public Works for Yukon Territory. That interview was posted on June 26, 2026. Just as an aside, Virginia Ann with CBC interviewed me in early June. That was after I had done my first video about this project in May and prior to her interview with the Public Works Director. But for whatever reason, she didn't air the interview that she conducted with me. I think she said something to the fact that she couldn't use it. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but anyway, let's move along here.
I mean, we are talking about a modern day construction with a modern day design. How do we explain that we are still here finding some soil instability that is forcing basically the construction to go back to the table to do a new design?
That's a very good question. And let's see how the minister handles it.
I can't speak to the technical details of how we got there. I can just say that as soon as our officials realized that there was issues with the soil and the bridge abutments, that's when the construction was stopped last year. So the path forward here now is that soil remediation and geotechnical work, and then a little more design to get us to tendering the construction.
Okay, in my opinion, that was a ridiculous answer. They've known of these unexpected and undesirable and excessive movements of the bridge structure for the new bridge, as well as apparently there were some impacts to the existing bridge for well over a year now. As a result, they halted construction, they terminated the contracts of the prime contractor and the engineer of record, and they don't know why they got to where they are. That's just silly. I mean, I get so sick of that excuse with various officials. Well, I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak to those points. Well, you're in a position to talk to the engineers and then convey to your various stakeholders what exactly happened. It's basic transparency and communication, in my opinion, and you see it with a variety of people in the public realm. I certainly have not pulled any punches with people at New Jersey DOT, Rhode Island DOT, Wyoming DOT. It's the old playbook of well, let's just focus on moving forward and let's not talk about how we got here.
What are those issues exactly?
I'm not the technical expert on that by any stretch, so I just know that there are issues with the abutments of the bridge moving due to the soil conditions.
How did we get there?
That's
Is it a human fault? Was it the design that was at fault?
That's not my job here. My job here is to get the bridge finished. There's likely many factors that led to the construction stopping. So we've had to take action in order to move the project forward and get the bridge finished.
Bizarre, in my opinion. I mean, you can't convey to the people, the public, what the problem is or what you allege the problem to be. I think this goes beyond the government trying to preserve their options for perhaps taking legal action against the contractor and the designer. To me, it suggests some culpability on the behalf of the Yukon government. And you can't just necessarily chalk this up to a design or construction error and say that's the extent of it. Of course, they're not saying anything. They're saying there's a problem. They've eliminated the contractor and the original designer from the project, and they're just focused on going forward. But she's not technical, so she can't tell you in even the most vague fashion how they got to where they are, what the types of problems were, and what the likely fixes are going forward. So to me, it's pretty obvious what the problem here is that they placed way too much fill in too short a time period, particularly at the north abutment of this bridge, and caused global stability problems and perhaps lateral spreading that made the embankment fills on the north approach unstable to open the roadway to traffic. And so they've had to pause construction and they're going to have to fix it.
You're saying that it's not your job. However, can we expect, Yukoners, can they expect to see the government take any legal action, any investigation, any audit into what happened exactly?
So as far as legal goes, that assessment will be done here in the future. And certainly we've internally looked at processes and what has happened to get us here and have improved processes and contract oversight and that kind of thing.
Again, that's pretty vague in my opinion in terms of response. I mean, you would think they would have an idea what their legal situation would be prior to terminating these contracts.
There's no timeline yet. Going back to creating a design for remediation work, how long can we expect that to take?
So the idea is to have the remediation design finished by this fall, and then to tender over the winter and spring so that when construction season starts next year, we're ready to hit the ground running.
Well, they've lost this construction season. I hope that Cowie has the information at hand in order to complete the design, because if they don't, you're looking at potentially taking up the better part of next construction season for getting that information before you could finalize a design. So that's a key question here. Let's assume that they do have enough information and they're using 2026 to complete their design, and the latter part of 2026 will be for issuing a set of construction documents for contractors to bid on, and that they could award the construction project to complete this bridge in early 2027 and have the full 2027 and onwards construction season available. Uh, I think just looking at the timeline and the amount of work that I think has to be done here, I believe there's going to be probably 2 full construction seasons before they can finish this project. So, you're talking 2028 at the earliest for finishing this job, and likely into early 2029. So May of 2029, I think, is likely when this bridge is finally going to be completed based on the information that I have. So the latter part of this video, I'm going to go into what type of fixes I think are most likely going to be pursued here. But these are these photos that an individual sent to me that were taken, according to him, on August 9th. You can see there's absolutely no construction going on at this project right now. And as I mentioned, I think the reason why, at least potentially, the Yukon government is being so cagey in terms of divulging any details about what happened to cause the suspension of the construction of this bridge and now having to implement remediation measures in order to complete the work is that they could have some culpability here. I've been involved with numerous projects where you give an owner good, sound engineering advice and they choose not to follow it for whatever reason. We saw this. I did a video a couple of years ago about this project, this massive retaining wall in New Jersey. And the contractor had pointed out to the DOT that the backfill gradation was inadequate to provide sufficient drainage for the retaining wall. And in the opinion of the contractor, it would lead to stability problems and potential failure of the retaining wall, which uh, ultimately happened here. And the DOT said, well, if you think there's a problem with the backfill, you can pay the extra $70,000 to change the gradation. It's on you. Well, the contractor's not going to take that on unilaterally, so they just built it as the project was spec'd. The failure occurred, and now the DOT is spending $90 million to rebuild this massively long stretch of retaining walls. So that's a, a prime example of an owner not taking the advice of a contractor or an engineer and then paying for it dearly. So I don't want to exclude the possibility here for this Nisutlin Bay Bridge replacement project that someone along the line said, hey, it may not be a great idea to place all this fill in lieu of actual bridge structure in the bay. We could have problems, or perhaps it's not a good idea to place all this fill without implementing foundation soil stabilization measures. So again, I'm not speculating. I'm just saying this happens or could have happened here. We just don't know because the Yukon government is not forthcoming with any level of details. So I reached out to Linda Benoit, this Minister of Highways and Public Works for Yukon Territory, and I copied their media relations spokesperson. And if I get a response to these questions, I'll pin them as a comment to this video. And if they warrant further elaboration, I'll do a separate video about it. But I asked them, would your office confirm that the problem with the new bridge abutments was a global stability problem that caused sliding and lateral spread of the foundation soils underlying the abutment fills? Second question, there appears that there were no ground improvement measures implemented for these foundation soils prior to fill placement, such as jet grouting, wick drains, or other soil strengthening mechanisms. Is that accurate? Question three, I'm in the possession of analysis results that indicate most of the problem movement occurred at the north abutment and also caused movement in the range of 30 to 45 millimeters of some of the bridge spans for the existing 1950s bridge. Does the Yukon government believe that there is a risk of additional movement of the existing bridge structure? Question four, will the existing bridge structure require underpinning or other stabilization work for the existing bridge prior to completing the replacement bridge project? Question five, was the Yukon government cautioned by the original project designer or consultant about the risks of having such global stability problems for the new or existing bridge structures due to the placement of the new abutment approach fills? And finally, what are the specific types of remediation work being contemplated for the abutments in order to complete the construction of the bridge replacement project? Well, because of all this rock fill that they have out here, I understand it may be just a riprap covering, but the gradation of the actual fill itself looks to be rather coarse. And to do in situ remediation is expensive and time consuming on its own without having to add the complication perhaps of pre-boring in order to get access to these softer soil layers, part of the original foundation soils that underlie these new fills. So they've got a lot of problems here getting at these soils that it's going to drive up the costs if they've got to remediate these soils in situ, and it's going to take a long time. So I think their best path forward here perhaps could be essentially giving up on the use of these massive approach fills and instead go with a actual bridge structure. So pile supported piers and new girders that extend through these former fill zones, just because I don't think they're stable. And I think to make them stable is going to cost way too much money and take way too much time. But we'll see. I'm going to continue digging for information about this project. I'm going to submit public records requests. Also, if any of you have any information, I would love to get my hands on the original geotechnical report or any evaluation memos about what was going on once they knew there were problems with ground movement at this bridge, particularly on the north side. This is my email. Please reach out to me, provide any information that you may have. And if you would like, and most people prefer to remain anonymous, I just can use the information and not divulge its source. But going back to what could have been done originally to not have this problem is they could have installed geosynthetic wick drains. These are plastic drainage elements. They have these corrugations to allow water to move along these channels, and they're typically wrapped with a non-woven geosynthetic fabric just to keep the soil from clogging the drainage channels in this internal element. And they're pushed into the ground using a mandrel. I believe this footage came from the approaches to the Gordie Howe Bridge, which was recently completed and opened. Another thing that can be done is to perform what's called jet grouting. You use a drill rod, you insert it into the ground, and you inject high pressure air, water, and cement grout to jet out the surrounding soil and cause mixing of the soil with the cement and form a much stronger soil element in situ. We're driving along here to the north. You can see the existing bridge girder, and pretty soon we're going to run out of girder because we're going to get to the approach fills, and we're still on the existing bridge where they have these truss spans, and I think they're just going to have to replicate new bridge structure extending through these fill areas, and just give up on trying to stabilize these soils in situ. I mean, they may try and do it. Their options, again, depend on how much pre-drilling would be required and how much time they have to do this work. But I think in all likelihood, they may be better off just cutting their losses here and constructing new bridge structure to tie through these fill areas and get this project completed. Because I think excavating soils could be problematic. That could further cause stability issues with the existing bridge. And again, I think the most expeditious path forward here is to drive piling and put new girders in and just build a new superstructure through these fill areas. But this is one of their frequently asked questions that the Yukon government's put out. And again, just vague as vague can be. Last summer, experts identified some concerns with the soil conditions near the bridge supports. A new engineer will be engaged to provide expertise and oversee the remaining work on the project, including soil remediation work. So they keep talking about soil remediation work, but I don't know. I think giving up on the remediation aspect may be the best move here. For the structure as it is now, it consists of 6 piers. Of course, we got the 2 abutments that apparently are not stable, and with a total of 58 piles that have been driven. And I don't have the details that show the depth of these piles, but I think they could be as deep as 100 feet. Let's just take a look driving north along the existing bridge. This is in May of 2024. You can see all the fill at the abutments appears to have been in place, and they're working on the spans out in the bay. So I think the original sin, if you want to refer to it that way, is the design decision and construction decision to have so much fill go out into the bay in lieu of traditional pile supported piers for the bridge superstructure. So again, if any of you have any information that you would like to share, please do. I've got the email link there. And with that, I want to do a quick book mention. I just read this book a few days ago, Alfred Hayes in Love. This book was published in 1953. It's an interesting book. It's almost a stream of consciousness type book, but the main characters are never named in the story. But it's set in New York, and it's essentially about a bunch of individuals who have problematic love lives that are a result of problematic lives. They really don't have things figured out. But I like these books that are set in New York City in the 1950s. It reminded me a lot of Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's. Had a similar feeling in terms of the characters and the setting. This book is a lot more in depth on the character development side, I think. Apologies to Truman Capote, but I would think that this book may have actually inspired Truman Capote, who's a wonderful writer. I would say Breakfast at Tiffany's. It's a great book. It's way better than the movie, but it's among my least favorite of Truman Capote books. So I'll cover that in other videos. But this particular book I really enjoyed. If you're so inclined, I've got a link in the description. With that, I want to send a shout out to those of you who have contributed to buy me a coffee. That's one of the better ways to support this channel. I also want to thank the channel members who typically preview these videos 1 or more days in advance. And I also want to thank those of you who've contributed to Super Thanks. So stay tuned for future updates, everyone.